Now, the sudden killing of Saif al-Islam Gadhafi has thrown Libya into a state of total political shock. For years, he was the only figure who could bridge the gap between the old supporters of his father's regime and the new revolutionary government. Now, because he was a central negotiator for powerful tribal networks and former officials, his death creates a massive power vacuum that no one else is currently equipped to fill. But without his influence to keep these factions unified, there is a serious risk that his followers will splinter, making the country even more difficult to govern. And this political earthquake likely means that any hopes for upcoming elections or national stability have been pushed further into the future. Rival leaders are already expected to scramble for control over his leaderless supporters, which could trigger a fresh wave of violence and targeted assassinations. But ultimately, the removal of such a key middleman doesn't solve Libya's long-standing divisions. Instead, it destroys one of the few remaining paths towards a peaceful, unified settlement, leaving the nation's future more uncertain than ever. Joining us on the conversation to speak more on this, we have Jason Pack, President and Founder, Libya Analysis LLC in London, UK. And we also have Bolu Michael B., Foreign Policy Analyst in Lubumba, Eswatini. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us at this time.
Pleasure.
Now let's get right to the heart of this. We'll begin with Jason. Jason, Saif al-Islam has been called the only bridge between Libya's past and its future. Now, with his assassination in Zintan, has the Green Movement effectively been decapacitated, or is there a successor waiting in the shadows of the tribes?
That's a good question, but I don't agree with the framing of your intro segment. Saif has been rarely seen since he was captured in late 2011. Okay. He's not a major political player, and his murder, although very tragic and illegal, doesn't change the political picture. In fact, the elections, which I was trying to help the UN and other players host in 2020 and 2021, were derailed because of Saif's candidacy. His killing doesn't make elections less likely. He never had more than 10 or 15% support in post-Gadhafi in Libya. It's very sad, and it shows the lawlessness in Libya, but I would not say that this in any way changes the bifurcation between East and West and the carve-out that the Dbeiba and Haftar clans have done of the Libyan economy in the last 5 or more years.
So let's have your thoughts, Bolu, on this. You know, what does this say? What does this mean for the Green Movement? And how does the removal of the Gadhafi wild card simplify or even further complicate, everything?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I think it's further complicates things, because the process that is ongoing. So this is kind of a huge setback. The UN roadmap assumes identifiable bloc leaders you can negotiate with, and Saif was one of those guys who could deliver the the old Gadhafi regime, or should I say the green bloc, to any deal. And now the anchor person, the main man, is gone. So the UN 2026 roadmap already stalled because there was no single framework that could get a buy-in from both the Western and the Eastern factions. And that was even with Saif in the picture. So it's very clear that the UN has no strong enforcement mechanism. It can convene, can talk, can discuss with people, but they cannot compel a fragmented bloc, a leaderless network to unify around a new representative. Not now, not anytime soon, because it's such a, I feel such a huge blow. It's a huge loss that can't just wake up and just appoint somebody or have somebody replace Saif just like that. So the roadmap will only work if every major constituency if they have a seat at the table. Without the Green Bloc leaders, that seat is empty. They are still very, even though Gadhafi is no longer alive, they're still very influential, they're still very powerful. So the UN must immediately identify and formally engage 2 or 3 persons, influential persons in that bloc, and try to incorporate and incorporate them into their plans and their roadmap. Otherwise, it's just going to be a 2-player game, and that would exclude 1/3 of the country.
All right, now let's go back to you, Jason. Let's dwell a bit on the death of Salim. Now, there's been hints of at foreign involvement, and who do you hold responsible? Do you hold the current Tripoli government or the LNA in the East responsible, for the death of Gadhafi?
We really don't know, and it would be inappropriate for anyone to say that there is concrete evidence. I just want to give the picture of what happened to your audience.
Please go ahead.
Saif al-Islam Gadhafi was captured fleeing Libya during the 2011 Arab and Libyan uprisings. He was imprisoned in Zintan. There was an ICC arrest warrant out for him. In about 2015, he was released, and then he worked with his former captors, the Zintani militias, as their political spokesman. He had a relationship with Russia, who saw him as their candidate inside Libya. He also had a series of relationships with the French, various African states, the ANC in South Africa, and others. On February the 3rd, gunmen broke into his house and shot him 19 times, including once in the head. And it appears that the gunmen were not from Zintan. However, we do not know who they were. We don't know if this is revenge killing, say by Misratan revolutionaries. We don't know if this was a targeted assassination by, say, members of the LNA or members of the GNU. We don't know anything. There have been rumors online which are false. Oh, Sarkozy is involved because he ended up going to jail from taking Gadhafi money, and that's what his court case was about. It's really impossible.
Rumors also of Russia being involved.
Oh, okay. That doesn't make sense. Why would you kill the exact person that you're supporting? Do you know what I mean? I don't think we know anything, and I'm someone who works with and deals with Libyan interlocutors for my business on a day-to-day basis. We just don't know.
All right. Now, I'm told that we're joined by Charles Onunaiju, Director of the Center for China Studies in Nigeria. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us at this time. If you can hear me, Charles?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, so go ahead, please. Let's have your thoughts, because the National Reconciliation and Human Rights track actually concluded just days before the assassination. What do you think about all of this? And is the National Reconciliation now a dead letter, given that a massive segment of the population just lost, a primary representative, even though Jason did say that he hasn't really been involved in politics for a while now?
Well, I think it's still the pattern of tragedy that is unfolding in that very great country. Libya has an incredible history of leading Africa in a whole range of issues, including development index before the killing and toppling of Gadhafi. And of course, the ripple effects of that tragedy is still unfolding in the Sahel and Nigeria, where terrorist groups were able to access weapons and trainers, and that has been one of the singular factors that has made for the resilience of terror, not only in the Sahel, but in Nigeria also. The recent killing of Saif Islam will only deepen the fracture, and I think it will only create more obstacles on the path to national reconciliation, like you briefly said. And he's been a relatively reclusive figure in recent times. especially after his disqualification from running in the presidency. He's been a lot more out of news and staying out of limelight before his killing. Whatever the reason or whoever is responsible for his killing will not be bode well for Libya, especially at a moment of this moment of healing, this moment of reconciliation. So it will only deepen the existing fractures and further push back any meaningful path towards reconciliation. You could see the outpouring of grief on Libyan street. I think in retrospect, Libyans are beginning to realize how much they were used as guinea pigs for experiment. They were used as guinea pigs in 2011, where they have their long-term leader, who in my view at that point offered even a transitional phase for his exit, you know, a power sharing formula and all that. But cool heads could not prevail. There was so much pressure to get him out of the way. And that has left Libya in a very fractured country. And the killing of Saif Islam, whom many has considered a reform phase of Libya then, is only going to deepen the challenge of reconciliation in that country. And the consequences will further worsen security in the region, including the Sahel and Nigeria.
Okay. Now, let's come back to Bolu. Bolu, you did hear what Jason said. He talked about the fact that Saif was imprisoned in Zintan, and he functioned as their spokesman, that's the militia spokesman, and also hasn't been involved in politics. But recent Arab Barometer data shows that nearly 45% of Libyans still trusted Saif al-Islam more than current leaders. So how do you explain this nostalgia, especially for the Gadhafi era, after 15 years of what the world called a liberation?
Fortunate that he's gone now, because I do perceive him as a unifying figure, and we have so many fragmented groups, from fragmented bases circling around the same prize. And what's the prize in front of them? And that's Saif's fragmented base. So that's what they are struggling for, and that's why I would rest my opinion on the previous speaker, because I just only kind of makes things a bit much more complicated, and they're beginning to realize that the uprising that ousted Muammar Gadhafi was not really necessary or needed, because it's tore the whole country apart, and Libya has not recovered up till this time since Gadhafi left. And I feel like for reasons of peace and stability, that's why Saif Islam didn't really get himself involved, so much in politics. They disqualified him from running for presidential election. He respected it. If he had the option of, inciting his base to challenge it and cause a bit more chaos. I mean, we saw how influential political leaders could be. For example, the Trump uprising in the United States, incited them, and it caused a lot of damage and to the legislative houses. So he could have played that kind of card as well, but he kept a low profile. He respected the constitution that was in place. He was ready for discussions on transitional government, and I believe many Libyans are looking back and like, oh wow, it was a mistake. The standard of living probably has dropped. The infrastructure maybe a little bit more broken, because the site of war in any country is really bad. It takes time. It's very easy to destroy. It takes time to build. Just last week I was in Mozambique, and the war-torn country, and I realized that war is no joke. So I can imagine that even though the building process may have been since Gadhafi died, there will still be remnants that show that, okay, Libya actually passed through a particular phase. And I hope that, okay, at some point in time, the cool heads will sit together and kind of move over and try to reconcile the Saif Islam base and indeed build a united country.
All right. Now, Jason, there's said to be a terminal divorce between the courts in Tripoli and Benghazi. Now, with you did say that you don't want to point fingers, and we're not sure who is responsible for his death. But the prosecutor general, with the prosecutor general investigating this murder, can any Libyan judicial body produce a verdict that the public will believe?
I think the short answer is no. To jump back to what the previous guest in Eswatini has said, he's exactly right to point out that standard of living in Libya is much worse than in the Gadhafi period. I lived in Libya in 2008 and 9. I did my doctoral research there in the early post-Gadhafi period, 2011 to 2014, and standard of living is dropping all the time. And there is a longing for the old times. That's for sure true. I don't think that Saif al-Islam's person represented that longing. He was someone who members of the Magarha or Qadhafifa, and to some extent the Warfallah tribes, would have looked to. But we're talking only 10 to 15% of the population here. It's exactly like the fact that there are protests in Iran because people think that it was better under the Shah, but they wouldn't want to have Reza Pahlavi come back and govern them. So that's the distinction that I'd like to make. In terms of the courts in Tripoli, there is no body in Tripoli or Benghazi who can investigate this in a neutral way, and there is no court which is competent to try any militiaman or any armed groups, because Libya, it's not just a failed state, it's a non-state. Libya exists in an issue of terra nullius. There's no sovereignty, there's no government really. So would I like to see justice done and someone go to jail? Yes. We have to be realistic. Libya is not in a position right now where there can be a neutral investigation and someone can be tried. The top table things that are happening in Libya right now are the engagement of the U.S. Special Envoy, Boulos, and the UN, Claudia Tetti, and what's going on with Tetti, what's going on with Boulos, and those things are not really working. So hopefully we can see a situation where dialogue and compromise can emerge. But, reading the tea leaves, we're not moving in any kind of positive direction, sadly, but we have to call a spade a spade.
All right. Now let's come to Charles and hear his thoughts on this. The ICC has pursued Saif for years, yet they have been quiet, notably quiet, if I must say, about his murder. What do you see? Do you see a double standard in how international law treats the Gadhafi family versus those who have ruled Libya since 2011?
Well, I think you've literally made the suggestion of what it is. The international justice system has shown itself to be not a strong pillar to be relied upon, especially for countries who are victims. Like in recent time, there has been some controversial judgments, put in to be taken the ICC and all that. But we know what happened to Libya, the pretenses under which Libya was destroyed, because the pretenses of, I remember the organization, the AU then issued a framework for negotiation between the two parties, the Libyan National Council, the opposition Libyan National Council, and the Gadhafi government, which the Gadhafi government agreed to, that they are willing to open negotiation with the opposition. Of course, the Americans had their way. Obama, Mr. Cameron, the French had their way and unleashed expect to see accountability, because if the International Court of Justice or the International Criminal Justice is anything to go by, we should have seen accountability with those who were responsible for the destruction of Iraq, destruction of Libya under very dubious pretenses. In Iraq, of course, the so-called weapons of mass destruction which was a pretext for destroying that country, turned out to be a hoax. In Libya, the same thing turned out to be a hoax. So it's a system where the strong get away and leaving the people looking for justice. So I think the idea of international justice is especially for countries like Libya, who become victims, not likely to be seen very soon. So for me, Libya should, people should find a framework for reinvigorating their country, putting their country back on the map, like our colleague in London said. People are disillusioned. The fracturing of the country is so intense, and that to pull it together is almost a challenge. No unifying authority, no existential unifying authority. You have fractured authorities here and there, whose jurisdiction and influence is limited to particular areas. These are very dangerous trends for such an important country as Libya, such a pivotal country as Libya. So we do hope that there could be an internal mechanism to rebuild the country. But if you're looking for international justice, especially as it's overseen by those who are responsible for the crime in the first place, that would be very long in coming.
All right, now let's, we're about wrapping up, but let's hear from Bolu. Bolu, you did say that you don't see Saif as a unifying force, but thousands actually attended his funeral in Bani Walid. Would you say that the funeral was for a man, or was it a mass protest against the last 15 years of political stagnation?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think people came out to pay their last respect to a man that is kind of a symbol of the past. Looking at how life was in the time of Gadhafi, and him being the son, it still carries his DNA in some way. I feel that that's institutional memory is gone for forever. I don't think it's a protest in any way, because if he had not passed away, I don't think anybody would take to the streets to actually attack him or protest against him. So I think it's just people coming together in solidarity to pay their last respect to a man that they indeed believed in, and was a unifying figure, in the country. And if you notice, the flags that the supporters were flying at the point was the flag of the old Libyan Arab Jamahiriya that Gadhafi, instituted. Anything green is a symbol of the old regime. So the plain flag, Gadhafi wrote the green book, and things like that. So it's just in their honor. If it was totally about protest, they probably would be flying the new flag. But showing the old flag is a symbol that they're identifying with the past. They're paying their last respect to a man that they honor, and they just wish him a great journey to the great beyond.
All right. Well, on this note, we'd have to thank you, gentlemen, for your time and for speaking on this. I really wish we had more time to dissect more of the questions that I have, but then I would find time to bring you guys back again. Jason Pack, President and Founder, Libya Analysis, LLC. We had Charles Onunaiju, Director of the Center for China Studies in Nigeria, and Bolu Michael B., Foreign Policy Analyst. Thank you so much once again, gentlemen.
Thank you for having us.